in an ordinary class, you need a single day to define, explore the different definition of international law itself. But we will try to narrow it down. ആർക്കെങ്കിലും മലയാളം വേണം എന്ന് നിർബന്ധം ആർക്കെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടോ? I will try to speak in Malayalam and as well as in English. Okay. So let me do one thing. I will exit from here and I will try to join it using my personal Gmail account, because I think I am being disturbed by the candidates who are coming in. So I will log out myself and log in again. Sorry for the inconvenience, everyone. I hope I am audible.
Yes,
So
sir,
let
yes.
me share with you. I will be sharing my slide with you. So we will take up the definition of international law, which is a very important portion that will be coming up in the UGC NET exam. So let me select the slide for you. I hope the slide is visible. Can anyone confirm whether the slide is visible or not?
Sir, it's not visible.
No, sir.
Okay, okay. Wait. It will take us a little bit of time. Why we are trying to explore the definitions of international law? It is because when, as you will see, when we are going through the different definitions, there are different point of view on what constitutes international law and what doesn't constitute international law, and it reflects in a way how international law has grown from its infancy to the current stage. Okay, just like every definition in law, there are different point of view. Okay, so what we are going to do is, by looking into the definitions given by many prominent jurists in law, many philosophers of law, we are trying to look into different point of view of international law. Okay, and please remember, when we are going through these definitions, they were true in the past. Some of these definitions are true in the past. Some of them may not be true in the present, and some of the definitions may be true in the past as well as in the present. Okay, so how that will play, how we can contextualize these definitions in order to understand the evolution of international law in a historical point of view, that you will understand at the end of this class with regard to definition of international law. Okay, so let us go into the definition of international law. So just like everything in law, we need to define. Okay, we need to define concepts in order to study law itself. So it's best to law.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, good morning, sir. Slides on ആക്കി വെക്കാമോ? അപ്പൊ കുറച്ചുകൂടി ക്ലിയർ ആയിട്ട് സ്ലൈഡ് കാണാമായിരുന്നു.
Sure. ഞാൻ start ചെയ്യാമോ? 1 minute.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Slide start ചെയ്യാമോ? Okay, fine. Now, definitions of public international law. Before we go into the definition of public international law, I would like to let you know who coined the term international law. Okay, international law was also known as law of nations, and prior to 1780, international law was known as law of nations, and the term international law was popularized by Jeremy Bentham through his literature and introduction to principles of morals and legislations. It is one of his eminent scholarly work. It was published in 1780. Okay, please note this literature of Jeremy Bentham, an introduction to principles of morals and legislations, where Jeremy Bentham popularized the term international law. And according to international law, according to him, international law constituted the law governing relations among states. Okay, so the term coining the term international law is credited to him. Okay, now we will try to learn the definition of international law by categorizing the definition of international law to old definition and new definition. Okay, and the old definition and the new definition reflects the progress of international law, the current status of international law, or the spirit of the time that was existing in the past. Okay, so let us go through the definitions and try to understand the evolution of international law itself. Okay, so the first definition of international law that we are going to analyze is a definition given by Lord Coleridge. Okay, Lord Coleridge. He's a judicial officer of the King's Bench, and while adjudicating a case known as Queens versus King, and this particular case relates to fishing rights. And while adjudicating this particular case law, he tried to define what constitutes international law or law of nations. As I have, you see, when Jeremy Bentham coined the term international law, both international law and law of nations were in use, and the term international law gained popularity after the First World War. Okay, now in this case, Coleridge defined international law or law of nations as the collection of usage which civilized states have agreed to observe in their dealing with each other. Okay, so there are actually 3 key terms that we need to look into. First term is civilized states, and another term is agreed to observe in the dealings with one another. Okay, so civilized states and agreed to observe, these 2 terms are very important. Why civilized states? What do you mean by civilized states here? I am trying to provide you with some context. And when Lord Coleridge and many of his contemporaries, while defining international law or law of nations, they have frequently used the term civilized states. And by that, what they are implying is there are 2 categories of states. One is civilized state and another one is non-civilized states. Now, who is a civilized state and who is a non-civilized state? Okay, please remember the timeline. This is in the 17th century. Okay, this is the 17th century, and in the 17th century, colonization was very much rampant. And the pretext that was given for justifying colonization, that is colonization meaning the subjugation of territories of other foreign countries by European superpowers. Okay, and the justification given for this colonization was the non-Christians, the so-called non-Christian states. The non-Christian states include the majority of the non-European states. All the non-European states were non-Christian states, especially China, India, Turkey, and the other Middle Eastern countries. All of them were considered as non-civilized states because they were non-Christians. And in this timeline, in the 17th century, all Christian states were considered as civilized. Okay, what they are trying to imply is with Christianity constitutes a universal value, and Christianity constitutes acceptable values, and everything that is non-Christian is not acceptable. And those states which are not accepting Christianity as their religion, they are uncivilized. And by converting these states into Christian states by colonization, these European powers were trying to help these states to become civilized. Okay, so civilized states here implying not only the ability of a state to adhere to international law, but whether the state is a Christian state or not. Okay, this is because of the timeline that was existing. Now, again, when we try to analyze another definition, and this time we are going into the definition given by John Austin. John Austin is a very famous jurist, and he gave a definition. He rather than giving a definition of international law, he made a comment on international law. And this comment on international law was made by John Austin in the Province of Jurisprudence Determined. This was his seminal work. It was published in 1832, and it was again edited and republished by H.L.A. Hart in 1954. Okay, so John Austin he propounded the positive. He was one of the most prominent positivist theorists. We will be coming into the positivist school of thought. According to John Austin, who propounded the command theory of law, according to him, law is a command of the sovereign backed by sanctions. It is a very famous definition that we have studied during our LLB days. Now, in his point of view, law is the command of the sovereign backed by sanctions. And according to him, international law does not have a sovereign, and it is not backed by any sanctions. And as far as he is concerned, international law constitutes a positive morality. Okay, so according to him, international law does not have a particular sovereign, and since it does not have a particular sovereign, it does not have any sanctions to enforce international law. Okay, so it is a positive morality. It is a pseudo law. It is not a law in the proper sense. That is the argument made by John Austin. So it is a positive morality. In other words, states follow international law as their moral obligation. In other words, they follow international law voluntarily. Okay, as a moral obligation. Okay, so this is the point of view of John Austin, and it is a famous quote: international law is a positive morality. Okay, and the point of view was expressed by John Austin in his seminal work, The Province of Jurisprudence Determined, published in 1832. Okay, moving on to the next definition. This time the definition is given by William Edward Hall. Okay, and in his seminal work, A Treatise on International Law, published in 1884. Okay, again, I would like to remind you the timeline. This is during this time, international law was in its infancy. Okay. Now, what is international law according to William Edward Hall? Okay. According to him, international law consists of certain rules of conduct which modern civilized states regard as binding on them in their relationship with one another. Okay. Modern civilized states, again the term civilized states is used. Okay. And the civilized states are what the civilized states are doing, they are entering into an agreement, okay, binding agreement, okay. That is modern civilized states regard as binding on them in their relationship with another, with a force comparable in nature and degree to that binding the conscious person to obey laws of his country. Okay, and which they also regard as being enforceable by appropriate means in case of infringement. Okay, there are a lot of things in this definition. There are two parts. Okay, William tried to, in the first part, William tries to define international law as a contract that exists among modern civilized states. Okay, in the yesterday you studied law of contract, and the certain salient features of contract is incorporated into international law, as you can see when they are trying to define international law. When you look into the first definition, you see Lord Coleridge tries to define international law as an agreement between civilized states, as a contract between civilized states to govern what? A contract governing the dealings with one another. Okay, what does a contract do? Contracts try to determine the actions and omissions of parties to a contract. Similarly, in the old definition of international law is trying to define international law as an agreement among civilized states to govern their actions and omissions with each other. Okay, so that is the point of view that is being expressed by Coleridge and William Edward Hall. Okay, and the second point is this nature of contract is compared between domestic law and international law. Okay, international law is being compared by William Edward Hall with domestic law, and he is saying that the international law is an agreement governing relationship between modern civilized states, just like how domestic law governs relationship between citizens within its territory. Okay, so a parallel line is being drawn. Okay, by drawing this parallel line, William is not trying to equate international law with domestic law. He's trying to acknowledge that there are some similarities. Okay, but international law is not as same as domestic law. Don't make a mistake. But he's trying to draw a parallel. Okay, as an inference. Now the definition closes by saying it can be enforced by appropriate means in case of infringement. By what is the appropriate means in case of infringement? Here he is trying to indicate war as a means of settling disputes. Whenever international law is violated during this time, that is 1884, war was seen as a means to settle disputes. Okay, and this only changed during the 1889 during the first Hague Conference. I will be coming to that. Okay, so he is also saying if this particular law is violated, there are appropriate measures that are available for rectifying the infringement of international law, and that is not indicated in this definition. What he is trying to indicate is war as a means to settle disputes. That is the definition given by William Edward Hall. Moving on to the next one. Again, the King's Bench of England again tried to define what constitutes international law in the case of West Rand Central Gold Mining Limited versus King. And then in this particular case, international law, again, it was defined as a form of rules accepted by civilized states as determining their conduct towards each other and towards others each other's subject. Okay. Again, in this particular definition, we are seeing another. It is more specific compared to other definitions we have now just discussed. It is saying that international law is an agreement that is rules. Okay, it is a rule. Rules mean rules are what? Rules for regulating the actions and omissions of civilized states among each other. Okay, towards each other. Again, it is a contractual nature. It is a contractual point of view of international law. It not only regulates the interaction among civilized states. International law also has the ability to regulate the conduct of state towards other subjects, other foreign subjects. International law can also determine the scope of foreign subjects who are interacting with a state. Okay, so in this particular case, international law or law of nation is being equated with private international law. Okay, so private international law is international law, actually it is divided into two: law of nations. In this timeline, that is the timeline is 1905. In 1905 there was international law, and international law is divided into two: private international law and public international law. Okay, public international law is the law that governs relationship among states. Okay, now private international law is a law which tries to determine the law that is applicable to a case where a foreign element is involved. Okay, when a foreign, what I meant by a foreign element, whenever a case is brought before a municipal court involving a foreign element. When I say a foreign element, what I meant is when it is a foreigner, or the subject matter of the dispute is located in a foreign country, it is known as a foreign element. Okay, so any legal dispute involving a foreign subject or a foreign subject matter, it is private international law. Okay, so private international law tries to govern the relationship between a state and a foreign within its territory. Okay, so in this definition, private international law as well as public international law is being covered by the court. Okay, so public international law is the law containing the rules accepted by civilized states, determining their conduct towards each other. And private international law is the law which regulates the actions and omissions towards the state and other subjects meaning foreign subjects, including their own citizens. Okay, now moving on to the next definition. Everyone, you can interrupt. Okay, if you don't follow any of the concept, please interrupt and you can ask questions. Okay, I hope I am not going too fast. If I am going too fast, please let me know. Okay, now moving on to the next definition. Next definition is given by Justice Gray. Justice Gray, he was a Supreme Court Chief Justice of United States. Okay, he was one of the Supreme Court Chief Justice of United States. He served as the Chief Justice of United States Supreme Court from 1828. From 1889 to 1902, I believe. So he is formally known as Horace Gray, Justice Horace Gray. He is also called as Justice Gray. And in the case of Paquete Havana, it is a case which came before the US Supreme Court, and this case involves a blockade that was introduced by the US government during the US-Spanish War, and one Cuban ship that was belonging to Cuba under the administration of Portuguese came to US territory by accident and violated the blockade, and when the blockade was violated, the ship was confiscated, and this confiscation was deemed unlawful by Justice Gray by interpreting the law of nations. And in this case, Justice Gray tried to interpret what is international law. And according to him, international law or law of nation is the name of body of rules which, according to the usual definition, regulate the conduct of civilized states in their intercourse with each other. Okay, so civilized states, again and again it is mentioned here, and make not mistake, when these jurists during this timeline say civilized state, they are indicating Christian states. Okay, now moving on to another definition given by a German jurist, LFL Oppenheimer. LFL Oppenheimer, in his seminal work International Law, published in 1905, defined international law or law of nations as the name given to the body of customary and conventional rules, okay, which are considered legally binding by civilized states in their intercourse with each other. Okay, so there is a peculiarity with this particular definition. Unlike other definitions that we have discussed, the previous definition, all the previous definitions consider international law as just rules. Okay, just rules. Okay, it doesn't specify what are the different sources of international law. For the first time in 1905, Oppenheimer is trying to distinguish or trying to say that there are more than one source of law, one source of international law, and he is saying it can be customary and conventional rules. Okay, rules has two sources of rules are there under international law. One is customary and the other one is conventional. Okay, and previous definitions, they do not acknowledge any sources of international law, they just say as rules. Okay, rules within inverted comma. Okay, so body of customary and conventional rules, it is very significant, where Oppenheimer is trying to recognize that there are two important sources of international law when you consider international law as rules governing the conduct of civilized states, and he is saying it is considered legally binding. Okay, another term is also being used. States consider these laws as legally binding. Okay, that is the term that is used by Oppenheimer. What do you mean by legally binding? It is, in other words, it is known as opinio juris. Opinio juris means there is an opinion that a particular custom is binding among nations under international law. Okay, that is what is meant by opinio juris. And there is another term that is when you read Article 3 of the UN Charter, it is known as, it says that members of the United Nations shall follow its obligations in good faith. Okay, doctrine of good faith. So international law must be obeyed or complied in good faith. Okay, so every rules that are complied by nations in good faith, they are known as international law. Okay, so international law not only contains two sources of law, that is customary and conventional. When I say conventional, here it means treaties. Treaties are nothing less than agreements. Again, agreements between nations. Okay, we will be discussing the different sources of law, and I will be trying to distinguish between what is a custom and what is an international convention. For the time being, please understand, in this definition, for the first time, differences are made. Okay, first time it is recognized there are two sources, and the international law is considered to be legally binding among civilized states. The term civilized state is still here, not changed. Okay, moving on to the next. Hackworth is another jurist, another English jurist. Hackworth, in his Digest Law published in 1906, he tried to again define international law as body of rules govern the relationship between states. Again, he is trying to acknowledge international law as a jurisprudence, a system of jurisprudence, which for the most part has evolved out of experience. Okay, that it is a very significant word. Okay, international law is a system of jurisprudence for the most part of which is evolved out of experience and necessities of situations that have arisen from time to time. Okay, that is the definition given by Hackworth. What is the significance of this definition? Okay, as you know, international custom, unlike custom, I will be going into international custom when we are discussing sources of law. To provide context for this particular definition, I will try to remind you that when we are looking into international custom, unlike domestic custom, okay, when you look into custom as a source of law under domestic law, a custom under domestic law must be time immemorial. It must have time immemorial antiquity, or it must be practiced continuously for a long period of time. That is one feature of custom as a source of law under domestic law. But when you go into international law, custom can emerge immediately. Okay, customary practice under international law can emerge within a day, or within a month, or within a year. Okay, time immemorial antiquity is not necessary, because according to Hackworth, international customary practices are driven out of necessity. Okay, necessity, for example, diplomacy, law of diplomacy. Law of diplomacy has originated out of the necessity to maintain amicable relationship with one among states. Okay, it emerged as a necessity to facilitate economic interest and to avoid conflict among nations. That is, it is out of necessity that the customary practice of law of diplomacy has emerged. Okay, so that is what is meant by experience and necessities. Okay, so moving on to the next definition, law of nation. That next definition is given by J.L. Brierley. J.L. Brierley, he is again another jurist. In his seminal work, The Law of Nations: An Introduction to International Law of Peace, published in 1928, he defines law of nations or international law as a body of rules and principles. Again, very significant. Another source of international law can also be principles. Okay, that here we have recognized. Firstly, we have recognized international law as rules governing the conduct of civilized nations, and then we noted that these rules can not only regulate the conduct of civilized nations, but they can also regulate the conduct of states, interaction between state and foreign nationals. Okay, that is private international law. Now, then we noted that these rules can be customary as well as conventional or treaty. Okay, and another source of international law that is being recognized by J.L. Brierley is principles. So, custom, convention, and principles. There are also principles. Okay, principles under international law. Okay, that is there, body of rules and principles of action which are binding upon civilized nations. Again, a contractual point of view of international law can be seen here in their relationship with one another. Okay, now moving on to the next definition given by Hans Kelsen. Again, another old definition. International law or law of nation is the name of body of rules which, according to the usual definition, regulate the conduct of states in their intercourse with each other. Okay, this particular definition was given by him in 1952. Okay, this is the last definition of international law which imbibes the old point of view. Okay, now. So what happened? What made the old definition to change? Okay, what are the circumstances that made the old definition to change? Okay, That is what I will be trying to define. Okay, there are a few things that happened that forced many jurists to relook into the old definition of international law, and they include practice of hosting international conferences. Okay, there was a practice of hosting international conferences. The practice of hosting international conferences happened in the first Hague Conference and the second Hague Conference. The first Hague Conference happened in 1899, and the second one happened in 1901. And this was a conference where nations came together to conclude multi-law-making treaties. Okay, so international law no longer involves just rules. Okay, they involve conventions. Why they involve convention? Because from 1899 and 1901, in the first and second Hague Conference, nations came together, and in this conference they concluded treaties. Okay, they amended treaties. Even before the Hague Conference, multilateral treaties were being concluded. I will come to that. But here, the first and second Hague Conference initiated a culture of international conferences where multilateral treaties were being concluded among nations. So international law is no longer just rules governing customary practice of states. International law is also codified rules under international conventions. Okay. Now, another event that happened is majority of international law was existing among nations as a mere customary practice or bilateral agreement between two equal powers, or a unilateral agreement by colonizing states against colonized population. Okay, that is why initially international law was considered as just rules. Okay, these rules were voluntarily followed by equal sovereign powers, that is equal superpowers. And there was a distinction between civilized and non-civilized states because some states were colonized by European powers in order to make them into Christians. Okay, when you convert a country into Christianity, and the assumption was they will become more civilized. Okay, now civilized states versus non-civilized states. The Europeans were forced to give a relook into the concept of civilized states and non-civilized states after the First World War. Okay, in the First World War, what happened was Japan, an Asian country, became part of the victorious side. Okay, when at the end of the First World War, Japan emerged as the first Asian country which defeated European powers, and the assumption that only Christian states can adhere to international law or wield enough sovereignty to participate in the international relations was forced to give a relook. Okay, Japan became the first non-Christian state to become a superpower, having equal position among European states. So the point of view that Christian states are more civilized or more powerful than non-Christian states, they were trying to relook into that. Okay, so then what happened was, after the end of First World War, few things happened. Okay, the First World War started in 1914 and it ended in 1970. And at the end of the First World War, International Red Cross, which was a non-governmental organization, international non-governmental organization, received Nobel Peace Prize for its contribution during the First World War, where it aided injured military personnel as well as civilians in war zones. For that, International Red Cross was given the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. So this, what that implied was the role of non-governmental organizations in implementing international law was being recognized. Okay. Now, next thing that happened is, at the end, the First World War was concluded through a peace treaty known as the Treaty of Versailles. Okay. When the Treaty of Versailles was concluded, between Germany and the Allied powers, the Treaty of Versailles, Part 1 of Treaty of Versailles also provided the provisions for the establishment of League of Nations. Okay, the League of Nations, which is a predecessor to the United Nations, was established through the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, and for the first time in international law, there emerged an international organization, international organization in the proper sense. Okay, so international, and it also got artificial personality. Okay, it was given the power to enter into contract with other states, just like a state. It was also given obligations under international law. So along with the non-governmental organization, international organization like the League of Nations also emerged as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so the Convention of the League of Nations came into force on 1990. Along with the League of Nations, in 1922, the International Court of Justice was also established. International Court, Statute of Permanent Court of International Justice was also established. Okay. In 1919 also, please note, International Labour Organization was also established. The purpose of International Labour Organization was to protect and promote basic fundamental rights. Okay. And the International Labour Organization was credited with pioneering the concept of human rights. Okay, International Labour Organization was there to secure individual rights. Okay, in other words, individuals were also considered as subjects of international law. Okay, after the First World War, prior to the First World War, only states were considered as subjects of international law. And after the First World War, what happened was non-governmental organizations like International Red Cross was recognized as a member of international law by giving Red Cross the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, by receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, the contribution of Red Cross to international law was acknowledged, especially with regard to humanitarian law. The First World War was concluded through the Treaty of Versailles, which established the League of Nations as well as the International Court of Justice. The League of Nations and the International Court of Justice were the first proper international organization having artificial personalities. Okay, there were also international organizations were also becoming subjects of international law. What is the significance of International Labour Organization? It was the first international organization which was established to secure individual rights, and it is credited with pioneering human rights. Okay. Now moving on to the definition of international law after the First World War. Okay. Now, as you can see, many subjects of international law came into the picture after the end of First World War. And the definition of international law was given a relook. Okay, in the previous definition, the old definition, the subjects of international law were only states. Okay, and the different sources of international law was very much trivialized. Okay, international law was considered as a rule or a customary practice or a convention, which are considered to be binding by civilized states. Okay, the term civilized state was also there. Now, what happened after the First World War? Let us look into the definition of international law after the First World War. Okay, so the first definition we are looking into is the definition given by Charles G. Fenwick in his publication International Law. It was published in 1924, and Charles G. Fenwick is saying international law may be defined as a broad may be defined in broad terms as the body of general principles and specific rules which are binding upon the members of the international community in their mutual relations. Okay, so this is very significant, and I believe there are two important components in this definition. First component is international law is considered as a body of general principles and specific rules. Okay, so the Charles G. Fenwick is acknowledging that the sources of international law is very much diverse. Okay, there are certain basic principles that is underlying customary practice and international conventions. Okay, so the Charles G. Fenwick is acknowledging the underlying general principles of international law. They are under international law, they are known as peremptory norm of international law. Okay, peremptory norm of international law. They are the foundation of international law. We will be coming into the peremptory norms of international law when we discuss the different sources of international law. Another important component of this definition given by Charles G. Fenwick is Charles G. Fenwick has expanded the subjects of international law, from states to international community. What do you mean by international community? Here, Charles G. Fenwick, by using the term international community, means states, international organizations, okay, individuals, okay, non-state entities. Non-state entities are like the Red Cross and Red Crescent. Okay, so by using the term international community, he's indicating that states are not only the subjects of international law. Along with the states, international organizations, individuals, that is individual human beings, whether that is a foreigner or a citizen, along with non-state entities like the Red Cross and Red Crescent, can also be subjects of international law. So this particular definition is very significant, and it indicates a change from a paradigm change from the old definition. Okay, so this is a new definition of international law that emerged after the First World War. So another thing also happened. Okay, another thing that happened was there was the Second World War, and after the end of the Second World War, the definition of international law again gone into a paradigm change. Okay, the International Red Cross again received a Nobel Peace Prize in 1944. Again, recognizing the contribution made by the Red Cross to maintain a basic humanitarian law during the Second World War. Again, non-governmental organizations were recognized as subjects of international law by granting them the Nobel Peace Prize. And what happened after that? On October 1945, after the end of Second World War, the United Nations organization was established. Subsequently, the International Court of Justice was also established. Okay. Along with that, in 1961, through the Bretton Woods Conference, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development was also established. Along with IBRD, there was also the International Monetary Fund. Okay. Finally, again in 1964, the League of Red Cross and Red Crescent received a Nobel Peace Prize. Every time the Red Cross is receiving a Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize is acknowledging the effort made by the Red Cross to maintain international peace through international law, through international humanitarian law. Okay, that elevated International Red Cross and other subsequent non-governmental organizations to the subjects of international law. So these all things again happened. Okay, and people were forced to give a relook into the definition of international law. Accordingly, the old definition given by Oppenheimer that we discussed earlier was again revised. Okay, it was again revised in 1992, and this revision was conducted by Austin, I believe Austin Thomas, or I do not recollect the name of the authors, it seems. Now, in the new edition of 1992, Oppenheimer's International Law 1992, the definition given by Oppenheimer was revised. Okay, so in the new definition, international law is considered as a body of rules which are legally binding on states. Okay, no longer it is considered to be legally binding by the states. It is the definition acknowledged that international law is legally binding on the state. Okay, no longer considered to be legally binding by the state. In their intercourse with each other, these rules are primarily those which govern the relationship of states. Okay. Again, it is emphasizing the importance of states as subjects of international law. But along with that is the new definition of international law of Oppenheimer is also acknowledging that states are not only the subjects of international law, along with states, international organizations, and to a certain extent, individuals may also be considered as subjects of international law. Okay, so this is a new definition of international law of Oppenheimer, published in 1992. Okay, this is a new definition. Now moving on to the next one. The next definition was given by William W. Bishop. Okay, in the Whiteman Digest of International Law. This was published between 1937 and 1943. That is, in this, William W. Bishop tries to define international law is the standard of conduct at a given time for a state and other entities subject thereto. Okay, so international law is a standard of conduct at a given time. At a given time, meaning international law is changing every time. Okay, that is William W. Bishop is acknowledging that from time to time the international law changes. The scope and ambit of international law changes from time to time. Okay, even though it changes from time to time, it nevertheless governs the state and other entities subject thereto. Okay, whatever the changes that is happening, these changes are applicable to states as well as other subjects. Okay, other entities. When he is saying other entities, it is equal to the terminology of international community given by Charles G. Fenwick. Okay, so this is another new definition. Here, states are not only the subjects of international law, other entities meaning international organizations, individuals, non-state entities are also subjects of international law. Okay. Now, moving on. Also, you please note the term civilized state is no longer mentioned here. Okay. Also, in the new definition of Oppenheimer, the term civilized state is removed. No longer you can see the term civilized states. Okay. So after the First World War, from the First World War itself, in order to consider a state as a civilized state, or in order to consider a state capable of abiding by international law, a state need not be a Christian state. Okay, a religion of a state is no longer necessary. Okay, that is clearly acknowledged in all the new definitions. All the new definitions acknowledge this fact. No longer the new definitions use the term civilized states. Okay. Now moving on to the next one, Philip C. Jessup. Philip C. Jessup is he's a superstar. Philip C. Jessup is a superstar among international jurists, and there is a famous international moot court competition conducted in his name. It is an international moot court competition on international law. The International Jessup moot court competition that is conducted all around the world. Okay, so Philip G. Jessup was an American jurist. He was also a diplomat. Okay, and he defined international law in his seminal work, A Modern Law of Nations, published in 1948. And according to Philip C. Jessup, international law or modern law of nations are the law applicable to states in their mutual relationship with each other, and may also be applicable to certain interrelationship of individuals themselves, where such interrelations concern matters of international concerns. Okay, so whenever an international law that governs the rights of citizens are involved, rights of individuals are involved, individuals are also subjects of international law along with states. That is what Philip C. Jessup is trying to acknowledge. Again, he is not using the term civilized states. Moving on to the next one. This definition is given by J.G. Stock. Okay. And this is one of the most modern definitions of international law, and it is also a holistic definition of international law. According to J.G. Stock, in his definition he tried to acknowledge the different sources of international law. Okay, he tries to say that international law is a body of law. It is not a rule. It is not a customary practice or a conventional rule. Okay, customary or conventional rule. It is a law. It is a law in the proper sense, which is composed for its greater part of the principles and rules of conduct which states feel themselves bound to observe. Okay, states feel themselves bound to observe. He is indicating the maxim opinio juris. Okay, opinion held by members of the international community. Okay, states feel themselves bound to observe and therefore do commonly observe in their relationship with each other. Okay, so why do the states how international law is implemented? It is implemented because states feel themselves bound to observe and therefore they do commonly observe. They don't mandatorily observe, they commonly observe. Okay, in their relationship with each other. And it also includes who are the subjects of international law. Next one is who are the subjects of international law. It also includes international institutions or organizations, and to a certain extent it also includes states and individuals. Okay, and certain rules of law relating to individuals and non-state entities. International law also includes rules relating to rules or laws governing relationship between individuals and non-state entities as far as the rights and duties of such individuals or non-state entities are in concern of international community. Okay, the term international community is incorporated by Charles D. Fenwick. Okay, so this is a modern definition of the most accurate modern definition of international law given by Charles D. Fenwick. Okay, so international law is a law. It's not a rule. Okay, it is not a customary conventional rule. It is a law in the proper sense, and it contains for its greater part principles and rules of conduct which states feel themselves bound to observe and therefore commonly observe. And in his book International Law, he tries to justify why states observe and commonly observe, because through international law the states are trying to maintain cooperation and international peace and security. Okay, they are through international law they are trying to find common grounds. Okay, in order to find common grounds among nations, in order to prevent conflict among themselves, they commonly observe international law. Okay, that particular reason is not given in this definition, but it is mentioned in his book. Okay, and the subjects of international law also includes international organizations, individuals along with states. Okay, and the rules of international law also includes the rules not only governing the conduct of states, it also includes rules and principles governing the relationship between individuals and non-state entities. Okay, as far as the duties and rights and duties of individuals and non-state entities are concerned under international community. So this is a very important definition. Please remember this. Okay. So subjects of international law other than nation states. So what are the examples that I can give you? If you look into Article 104 of the United Nations Charter, what you can see is the organization shall enjoy, it says that the United Nations organization shall enjoy in its territory of each of its member states such legal capacity as may be necessary for the exercise of its functions and fulfillment of its purpose. Okay. In other words, Article 104 gives United Nations a corporate personality. Okay, a corporate personality is given to United Nations. Okay, an artificial personality is given to United Nations, where United Nations is given a bundle of rights and duties, just like a company, a private limited company or a public limited company, which is an artificial company, artificial person under law through the Companies Act. The United Nations is also given artificial personality under the UN Charter under Article 104. In other words, through Article 104, by giving the United Nations artificial personality, an international organization is also considered as subjects of international law. Okay, that is the impact of Article 104. Moving on to Article 105. What does Article 105 say? The organization shall enjoy in its territory each of its member such privileges and immunities as necessary to fulfill its purpose. Okay, that is United Nations will enjoy diplomatic immunities. Okay, clause 2 says representatives of the members of the United Nations and officials of the organization shall similarly enjoy such privileges and immunities as are necessary for independent exercise of their function in concern with the organization. Okay, so it is again, it speaks about granting diplomatic immunity to personnels of employees of the United Nations in order to execute their function. So in other words, international organization is considered as subjects of international law, and states are not only the subjects of international law. And when you look into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the subsequent international conventions on human rights, it also indicates that individuals are also subjects of international law along with international organizations. So these are all the changes happened after Second World War. Again, there was a prominent case that was filed before ICJ. This case titled as Reparation for Injuries Suffered in the Service of the United Nations. That was filed before the International Court of Justice. And the question before the International Court of Justice was whether international United Nations organization is a subject of international law. In order for it to claim compensation for injuries suffered to its service personnel while conducting ceasefire operation, observation of ceasefire between Palestine and Israel, State of Israel. Okay. There was a diplomat that was assigned by the United Nations, a Swedish diplomat. His name is Count Falk Bernardo. And Mr. Falk, who was an ambassador to the United Nations, serving to observe the ceasefire compliance between Palestine and State of Israel. While doing his duty in the territory of Israel, he was assassinated. Okay, and the State of Israel failed to provide sufficient security for him, and which the State of Israel should provide according to Article 105, Clause 1 and 2. Okay, according to Article 105 and 2, the State of Israel should provide all the facilities necessary to Count Falk to execute his obligations as a UN employee, and the State of Israel has failed to do his obligations to the United Nations under Article 104 of the UN Charter, and the UN claimed compensation, okay, unliquidated damages from State of Israel for its failure to provide sufficient protection to enable the UN employee to do his duty. And in this case, ICJ declared that UN is a member of the international community. It is also a subject of international law, and therefore United Nations can claim compensation for injuries suffered for its employees. Okay. So subject of international law other than nation states, individuals were also considered as subjects of international law because of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that came into force in 1948, and the subsequent international conventions that was derived from the UDHR, that was the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights that came into force in 1966, established that individuals are also subjects of international law. Okay, individuals are also subjects of international law, not only international organizations and states. So what is the difference between old definition and the new definition? Okay, this is a table that I have given. Okay, when you compare with the old and new definition, first thing that you can see is in the old definition, International law includes body of customary rules and conventions which are considered legally binding. In the new definition, international law includes, along with the customary rules and principles, principles and conventions, and they are considered as law, not mere customary practice or not mere rules. They are considered as laws. Okay. The second one is states are the only subjects of, coming under international law. When you look into the old definition, state is the only subject of international law. When you look into the new definition, along with the state, international organization, non-state entities, multinational corporations, individuals are also subjects of international law. Okay. International law, the third one is international law governs intercourse among civilized states. Okay. Now, the term civilized state is no longer used in the new definition. No longer there is a differentiation between uncivilized and civilized state. Rather than the term civilized state, the term used in the modern definition is all nations, peace-loving nations. Okay, peace-loving nations is the term that is used. Instead of civilized state, the term that is used in the new definition is peace-loving states. Okay, that term peace-loving state is used under Article 4 of the UN Charter. That is the major changes. Okay. Then along with the differences, there are also certain commonalities. Okay, there are certain overlap between the old definition and the new definition. What is the overlapping elements? If you look into Article 2, Clause 2 of the UN Charter, it says that all members, in order to entrust to all of them the rights and benefit arising from the membership, shall fulfill in good faith the obligations assumed by them in accordance with the present charter. Okay, so the states must follow international law in good faith. Okay, in other words, international law must be followed by them voluntarily. Okay. Membership, Article 4 of the UN Charter says that membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states. The term civilized state is not used. Peace-loving state is used, which accept the obligation contained in the chapter and in the judgment of the organization are able and willing to carry these obligations. Okay. And another one is Article 36 of the ICJ statute, the jurisdiction of the court. Okay, ICJ court. In all cases, with the parties referred to it, all the matters specifically provided for in the Charter of the United Nations or treaties and convention in force. Okay, that is the International Court of Justice, jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. Shall comprises of all the matters which is contained under the UN Charter and all the conventions and treaties that are in force under the UN Charter. So all these elements indicate that is the international law manifest by surrender of sovereignty. Okay, international law manifests when states surrender their sovereignty. That is the commonality between the old and the new definition. And this is indicated by the provisions of the UN Charter as well as the ICJ statute. Okay, so by following the international law in good faith, the states are surrendering their sovereignty, accepting the obligation contained in the present charter and the judgments of the organization. Again, they are surrendering their sovereignty. In order to avail the jurisdiction of the ICJ, states must surrender their sovereignty to ICJ. Again, in order to have a compulsory jurisdiction under Article 59 of the ICJ statute, the states must surrender their sovereignty to ICJ. Okay, so the old and the new definition agrees on one aspect, that is, in order for the international law to manifest, states must surrender their sovereignty voluntarily. That is the common element that is overlapping between the old and new definition. Now, I believe any questions that any one of you are having with regard to the definitions? I believe it is already 10:45. Now, the next important thing that we have to go into is historical development of international law. Okay. Before I go into that, any questions that anyone wants to ask with regard to the definitions of international law?
ഒരു സംശയമുള്ളത്.
ഒരു മിനിറ്റ് എന്റെ ഹെഡ്സെറ്റ് ഒന്ന് വെച്ചോ. ഒരു മിനിറ്റ്. പറഞ്ഞോ. ഹലോ.
ഒരു സംശയമുള്ളത്, ഇപ്പൊ ഒരു രാജ്യത്തിനകത്ത് നടക്കുന്ന ഒരു ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽസിനെതിരെ നടക്കുന്ന ക്രൂവൽറ്റി.
എന്റെ ഹെഡ്സെറ്റ് കണക്ട് ആയില്ല. ഒരു മിനിറ്റ്. ഹലോ, പറഞ്ഞോ ഇപ്പൊ കേൾക്കാം.
ഒരു രാജ്യത്തിനകത്ത് നടക്കുന്ന ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽസിനെതിരെ നടക്കുന്ന ക്രൂവൽറ്റി. ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ പറഞ്ഞാൽ, ഒരു രാജ്യത്തിനകത്ത് നടക്കുന്ന ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽസിനെതിരെ നടക്കുന്ന ക്രൂവൽറ്റി. അതിപ്പോ മ്യാൻമാറിലെ കൂട്ടക്കുരുതി. അപ്പൊ അത് നമുക്കൊരു പബ്ലിക് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോയുടെ പരിധിയിൽ കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ പറ്റില്ല. കാരണം ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽസും പാർട്ടാണല്ലോ.
ആണ് ഓൾറെഡി വന്നല്ലോ. ഗാന എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഓഫ് ഗാന brought a suit against Myanmar. That is the Geneva Convention on Humanitarian Law. That is 1954. നമ്മൾ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യും. ആ ജനീവ കൺവെൻഷന്റെ ഇതിനകത്ത്, അതായത് that regulates humanitarian law. Humanitarian law എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ the principles of international law that is applied during war, okay, during a conflict. അപ്പൊ ഈ ജനീവ കൺവെൻഷന്റെ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു ഇത് വയലേറ്റ് ആവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ, എന്തെങ്കിലും അതിനകത്ത് ഒരു ഡിസ്പ്യൂട്ട് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അതിനകത്ത് ഒരു ക്ലോസ് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്, they must settle that particular dispute or conflict before the ICJ. Okay. Accordingly, Myanmar, state of Ghana, including India, they are party to the Geneva Conventions. Okay. അപ്പൊ മ്യാൻമർ ഈ റോഹിംഗ്യ മുസ്ലിംസിനെതിരെ ഈ ജനസൈഡ് നടത്തുന്നതായിട്ട് എവിഡൻസ് ഗാനയ്ക്കും ബാക്കി ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ മെമ്പേഴ്സ് ഓഫ് ദി ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിക്കും കിട്ടിയപ്പം Ghana filed a suit under Article 36 of the ICJ Statute. Okay. ICJ Statute Article 36 പറയുന്നത് എപ്പോഴാണോ രണ്ട് രാജ്യങ്ങൾ അവരുടെ സോവറിനിറ്റി സറണ്ടർ ചെയ്ത് ICJക്ക് ജൂറിസ്ഡിക്ഷൻ കൊടുക്കുന്നത്, അപ്പം ICJക്ക് അഡ്ജുഡിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാം, ആ ഡിസ്പ്യൂട്ട് അഡ്ജുഡിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാം. ഗാനയും മ്യാൻമറും ജനീവ കൺവെൻഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന കൺവെൻഷനിൽ പാർട്ടി ആയപ്പം ഓട്ടോമാറ്റിക്കലി ICJക്ക് ജൂറിസ്ഡിക്ഷൻ സറണ്ടർ ചെയ്തു. അതുപോലെ അപ്പം തന്നെ ഗാന എന്ത് ചെയ്തെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ, ഗാന മൂവ്ഡ് എ പെറ്റീഷൻ അഗേൻസ്റ്റ് മ്യാൻമാർ. അതിന്റെ ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് 2019 തന്നെ വന്നു. അപ്പം ICJ പറയുന്നത് സസ്പെൻഷൻ ഓഫ് ഓൾ ഹോസ്റ്റിലിറ്റീസ്, ഓക്കെ, suspension of all hostilities against the Rohingyas must be made. Argument made by the state of Myanmar is അവർ നടത്തുന്നത് ഒരു anti-terrorist operation ആണ്. As a result of the anti-terrorist operation, ഒരു conflict has emerged. അതായത് law and order, there is a breakdown of law and order. അതാണ് അവിടെ നടക്കുന്നത്, അല്ലാതെ ജനസൈഡ് അല്ലെന്നാണ് മ്യാൻമറിന്റെ ആർഗ്യുമെന്റ് ബിഫോർ ദി ICJ. ആ കേസിന്റെ ടൈറ്റിൽ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഓഫ് ഗാന വേഴ്സസ് സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഓഫ് മ്യാൻമർ വിത്ത് റിഗാർഡ് ടു ദി റൈറ്റ്സ് ഓഫ് റോഹിംഗ്യ മുസ്ലിംസ്. അതാണ് അതിന്റെ ടൈറ്റിൽ. ആൻഡ് ദിസ് വാസ് അഡ്ജുഡിക്കേറ്റഡ് ഇൻ 2019. ഓക്കെ. ആൻഡ് ദ വേർഡിക്ട് വാസ് the state of Myanmar is obliged has the obligation to monitor the application of use of force, and the application of use of force will also be observed by UN agencies, United Nations agencies. Okay. അവര് ഈ ഹോസ്റ്റിലിറ്റീസ് സീസ് ചെയ്തോ അവിടുത്തെ റോഹിംഗ്യ മുസ്ലിംസിനെ തിരിച്ചു കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ, അത് എവിടം വരെ ആയെന്നുള്ളതൊക്കെ മോണിറ്റർ ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഒരു UN ഏജൻസിയെയും ICJ എസ്റ്റാബ്ലിഷ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഈ കോവിഡ് എപ്പിഡമിക് കാരണം അത് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്യാനും പറ്റിയില്ല. പിന്നെ ഒരു റീസെന്റ് മ്യാൻമറിൽ ഒരു മിലിറ്ററി കൂപ്പ് നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ ഉള്ള എല്ലാ സാഹചര്യങ്ങളും കാരണം ICJയുടെ ഈ ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് ഇതുവരെ ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല. ഓക്കെ. Any other questions with regard to the definition? As I expected. Yes. Ronsi Matthew. Yeah, correct. Yes. പറഞ്ഞു.
ICJയുടെ ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്യാന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും ആക്ച്വലി ഈ സോവറിനിറ്റി സറണ്ടർ ചെയ്യാന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും അത് ഒരു പ്രിസംപ്ഷൻ ഓഫ് സറണ്ടറിങ് സോവറിനിറ്റി എന്നുള്ളതേ ഉള്ളൂ, അല്ലാതെ എക്സാക്ട്ലി സറണ്ടറിങ് ഓഫ് സോവറിനിറ്റി ഇല്ലല്ലോ.
ആക്ച്വലി അതാണ് ഒരു സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് തോട്ട്. അതായത് റോൺസി ഇപ്പൊ പറയുന്നത് പോസിറ്റിവിസ്റ്റ് സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് തോട്ടിന്റെ പോയിന്റ് ഓഫ് വ്യൂ ആണ്. അത് if you are in the it depends on which club you are in. ഇപ്പം പോസിറ്റിവിസ്റ്റ് തിയറിസ്റ്റുകാരുടെ ക്ലബിലാണ് റോൺസി എങ്കിൽ റോൺസിയുടെ അസംഷൻ അവര് ഇങ്ങനെ സറണ്ടർ ചെയ്യുന്നു. എന്താണ് റോൺസി പറഞ്ഞു? വാക്കെന്തായിരുന്നു? ഒന്നുകൂടി പറയാമോ? സറണ്ടർ ചെയ്യുന്നുള്ള അസംഷൻ. എന്താണ്
സറണ്ടർ ചെയ്യുന്നു എന്നുള്ള ഒരു പ്രിസംഷൻ മാത്രമല്ലേ?
പ്രിസംഷൻ. അതെ. അതായത് പ്രിസംഷൻ ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് പോസിറ്റിവിസ്റ്റ് സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് തോട്ട് പറയുന്നതാണ്. ഓക്കെ. അതായത് അവരുടെ സെൽഫ് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റ് സെക്യൂർ ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് അവര് അവരുടെ സോവറിനിറ്റി സറണ്ടർ ചെയ്യും എന്നാണ് അസംഷൻ. ഓക്കെ. പക്ഷെ ഈ നാച്ചുറലിസ്റ്റ് സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് തോട്ട് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു സംഭവമുണ്ട്. നാച്ചുറലിസ്റ്റ് സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് തോട്ടുകാര് അവരുടെ പോയിന്റ് ഓഫ് വ്യൂവിൽ അവര് പറയുന്നത് എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാല് ഇപ്പൊ റോൺസി ഏത് രാജ്യം നോക്കിയാലും ഇപ്പൊ ചൈന എടുത്താലും റഷ്യ എടുത്താലും നോർത്ത് കൊറിയ എടുത്താലും ഇവരെല്ലാം മൗലിക അവകാശങ്ങൾ എന്നുവെച്ചാൽ ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ്സ് വയലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന രാജ്യങ്ങളായിട്ടാണ് കൺസിഡർ ചെയ്യുന്നത് വെസ്റ്റേൺ കൺട്രീസ്. ഓക്കെ. ഇന്ത്യയും ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ്സ് വയലേഷൻസ് നടത്തുന്നെന്നും അലഗേഷൻസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഓക്കെ. നൗ വെൻ ദീസ് അലഗേഷൻസ് ആർ റേസ്ഡ്, ചൈനയോ റഷ്യയോ നോർത്ത് കൊറിയയോ ഇന്ത്യയോ അവരാരും പറയത്തില്ല നമ്മൾ ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ്സ് റെക്കഗ്നൈസ് ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല. ഓക്കെ. അവരെല്ലാവരും അവരുടെ എല്ലാ ആക്ഷൻസും whether it is a violation of international law or whether it is adherence to international law, whenever an allegation of violation of international law is alleged, the particular action that they have taken, they try to justify it. China പറയും നമ്മൾ ഒരു ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോയും നമ്മൾ വയലേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല. We have acted within the scope of international law. ഇപ്പൊ മറ്റേ ഉറുഗ് മുസ്ലിംസ് ഷിൻജാൻ പ്രൊവിൻസിലെ ഉറുഗ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന മുസ്ലിം കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി അവിടെ ഒരു മൈനോറിറ്റിയാണ്. ഹങ് ചൈനീസ് ആണ് ചൈനയിലെ മെജോറിറ്റി. ഞാൻ ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ പറയാണ്. അവിടെ ലേബർ ക്യാമ്പ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. അവരെ അറസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്ത് റീ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ ക്യാമ്പ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു ക്യാമ്പിലേക്ക് ചൈന വിടുകയാണ്. അപ്പൊ അവര് പറയുന്നത് ഉറുഗ് മുസ്ലിംസിനെതിരെ വെച്ചിരിക്കുന്ന റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻസ്, അവർ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്ന വാക്കെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അവര് കുറച്ച് റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻസ് ഇമ്പോസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആൻഡ് ദാറ്റ് റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻ ഇസ് വിത്തിൻ ദ സ്കോപ്പ് ഓഫ് യൂണിവേഴ്സൽ ഡിക്ലറേഷൻ ഓഫ് ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ്സ്. ഈ UDHR വായിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ UDHRന്റെ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ ഐ ബിലീവ് ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ 17 റീസണബിൾ റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു സ്കോപ്പ് ഉണ്ട്. The rights acknowledged under the UDHR is not absolute. It's subject to reasonable restriction. അപ്പം നാഷണൽ സെക്യൂരിറ്റിയും പബ്ലിക് ഗുഡും പ്രൊമോട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് there can be a curtailment of human rights. അപ്പം ചൈന ചെയ്യുന്നത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നോർത്ത് കൊറിയ ചെയ്യുന്നത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റഷ്യ ചെയ്യുന്നത് ഇറ്റ്സ് എ റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻ ഓൺ ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ്സ്, റീസണബിൾ റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻ ഓൺ ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ്സ് ഫോർ ദ ഗ്രേറ്റർ ഗുഡ് ഓഫ് ഓൾ. ഓക്കെ. ഇപ്പൊ നവാൽനി, റഷ്യയിലെ നവാൽനി എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു പൊളിറ്റീഷ്യനെ അറസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തതിന്റെ ജസ്റ്റിഫിക്കേഷൻ റഷ്യൻ ഗവൺമെന്റ് പറഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നത് ഇൻ ഓർഡർ ടു മെയിൻറ്റെയിൻ പബ്ലിക് ഓർഡർ എന്നാണ്. റഷ്യൻ ഗവൺമെന്റ് റഷ്യൻ ഗവൺമെന്റ് വിൽ നെവർ സേ വി വിൽ നോട്ട് അക്നോളേജ് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ. അവർ ചെയ്യുന്ന എല്ലാ ആക്ഷൻസും ദേ വിൽ സേ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് അക്കോർഡിംഗ് ടു ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ. ഇപ്പൊ ഇന്ത്യ ജമ്മു ആൻഡ് കാശ്മീരിൽ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ 370 അബ്രോഗേറ്റ് ചെയ്തപ്പം 2019 ഓഗസ്റ്റ് 15 അബ്രോഗേറ്റ് ചെയ്തപ്പം 2019 ഓഗസ്റ്റ് 15 12 മണി വെളുപ്പാങ്കാലത്ത് 12 മണി തൊട്ട് അവിടെ ഇന്റർനെറ്റ് കണക്ഷൻ കട്ട് ചെയ്തു. അവിടെ ഇന്റർനെറ്റ് കണക്ഷൻ ഇല്ല. ഇപ്പോഴും ഇന്റർനെറ്റ് കണക്ഷൻ ഇല്ല. അതായത് ഇപ്പം 3 വർഷമായെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു ഇപ്പം, അല്ല 2 വർഷം അല്ലേ? 2 വർഷമായി. ഈ ജമ്മു ആൻഡ് കാശ്മീരിൽ ഇന്റർനെറ്റ് ഇല്ലാഞ്ഞിട്ട് 2 വർഷമായി. അവിടെ ഇന്റർനെറ്റ് ഒരു മൗലിക അവകാശമാണെന്ന് നമ്മുടെ കേരള ഹൈക്കോടതി പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. അത് അയ്യോ, നമ്മുടെ ആളിവിടെ ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, ആ ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റിന്റെ ആള്, അയ്യോ പുള്ളിക്കാരിയുടെ പേര് ഞാൻ മറന്നുപോയി. ഹലോ, ആ പെറ്റീഷൻ, റിട്ട് പെറ്റീഷൻ ഫയൽ ചെയ്ത കുട്ടി നമ്മുടെ LJRF-ലെ മെമ്പറാണ്. പുള്ളിക്കാരിയോ, മൈ അപ്പോളജീസ്, ഐ ഡോണ്ട് റിമെമ്പർ ഹർ നെയിം. ഇവിടെ ഞാൻ ക്ലാസ്സിലുണ്ട്, പേരൊന്ന് റേനിയൽ. We have the pleasure of having Raniel. Raniel filed a writ petition before the Kerala High Court. As a result of that petition, Kerala High Court recognized access to internet as a fundamental human right, along in addition to fundamental right under Indian Constitution. അപ്പൊ അത് റാനിയൽ ഫയൽ ചെയ്തത് ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് ബിഫോർ ദിസ് ബ്ലാക്ക് ഡൗൺ, ഇന്റർനെറ്റ് ബ്ലാക്ക് ഔട്ട്. അപ്പൊ അത് ആ ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് അവിടെ വയലേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കും. അപ്പം അവിടെ ഇന്ത്യൻ ഗവൺമെന്റ് പറയുന്നത് നോ ഫണ്ടമെന്റൽ റൈറ്റ് ഇസ് അബ്സല്യൂട്ട്, നോ ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ് ഇസ് അബ്സല്യൂട്ട്, ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് സബ്ജക്ട് ടു റീസണബിൾ റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻ ആൻഡ് that is given under international law. So whatever action the Indian government has taken as a result of the Article 370 abrogation, it is within the scope of international law. അപ്പം ഇവിടെ ആരും ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ അണ്ടർമൈൻ ചെയ്യാനോ അത് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ അല്ലെന്ന് പറയാനോ ആരും ശ്രമിച്ചിട്ടില്ല. അത് ജൂറിസ്റ്റ് മാത്രമേ പറയത്തുള്ളൂ, അക്കാഡമിഷ്യൻസ് മാത്രമേ ഇങ്ങനെ സംസാരിക്കത്തുള്ളൂ. ഒരിക്കലും ഒരു ഡിപ്ലോമാറ്റോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു സ്റ്റേറ്റ് സോവറിനോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പ്രാക്ടീസിങ് ലോയറോ ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ ഒരു ലോ അല്ലെന്ന് പറയത്തില്ല. അക്കാഡമിഷ്യൻസ് ഷുഡ് ബി ബ്ലെയിംഡ്. നമ്മളെ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്ന സാറന്മാരെ തന്നെയാണ് നമ്മൾ കുറ്റം പറയേണ്ടത്. കാരണം നിങ്ങളൊക്കെ LLM-ന് പഠിക്കുമ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾ എന്തിനാ ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ എടുക്കുന്നത്? അഡ്മിനിസ്ട്രേറ്റീവ് ലോ എടുത്തൂടെ? ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ ഒരു ലോ ആണോ? എന്താ സ്കോപ്പ് എന്നൊക്കെയാണ് നിങ്ങളെടുത്ത് പറയുന്നത്. അത് I will blame it on the academicians. Okay. Now, any other questions?
Fine. Thank you.
Any other questions, anyone? Actually, my apologies. I should be taking you definitions and nature of international law. But you see, ഈ definitions പലപ്പോഴും multiple choice options ആയിട്ട് വരുന്നുണ്ട്. And I thought it is very necessary to have a very close observation of the different definitions, because ഈ definitions options ആയിട്ട് ഉറപ്പായിട്ടും വരും. ഈ ഒരു ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ഓപ്പൺഹൈമറിന്റെ ഒരു ഡെഫിനിഷന്റെ ഒരു കോട്ട് തന്നിട്ട് ഇത് ആരാണ് ഈ ഡെഫിനിഷൻ തന്നതെന്ന് പറയും. ഓക്കെ, ഈ പർട്ടിക്കുലർ ഡെഫിനിഷൻ ആരാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്? അപ്പൊ ഓപ്ഷൻ ആയിട്ട് വരുന്നത് ഓപ്പൺഹൈമറിന്റെ 1902 എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഓപ്ഷൻ വരും. സെക്കൻഡ് ഓപ്ഷൻ വരുന്നത് ഓപ്പൺഹൈമറിന്റെ 1992 എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഓപ്ഷൻ വരും. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് ചിലപ്പോൾ അവർ പറയും JG ഫെൻവിക് എന്ന്. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങൾ ഏത് ഓപ്ഷൻ ആയിരിക്കും എടുക്കുന്നത്? കറക്റ്റ് ഓപ്ഷൻ എടുക്കണമെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഈ പുതിയ ഡെഫിനിഷനും പഴയ ഡെഫിനിഷന്റെ ഒരു അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡിങ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണം. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഞാൻ ഇത്രയും ഡീറ്റെയിൽ ആയിട്ട് ഡെഫിനിഷൻ എടുത്തത്. ഉറപ്പായിട്ടും മൾട്ടിപ്പിൾ ചോയ്സ് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആയിട്ട് ഇതിൽ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു ഡെഫിനിഷൻ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് വരും. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങൾ എന്താ ചെയ്യേണ്ടതെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ വേർഡ് ബൈ വേർഡ് യു ഹാവ് ടു ഡീകൺസ്ട്രക്ട്. ഈ ഡീകൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ ആണ് ഇത്രയും സമയം എടുത്തത്. ഐ വാസ് ഹോപ്പിംഗ് ടു കവർ ബോത്ത് ഡെഫിനിഷൻ ആൻഡ് നേച്ചർ ഓഫ് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ. ബട്ട് ഇത് 11 മണിയായി. എന്റെ ക്ലാസ് 11 മണി വരെയാണ് എനിക്ക് സമയം തന്നത്. ബട്ട് ഐ തിങ്ക് സഫി സാർ ഉണ്ടോ ഇവിടെ?
സന്ദീപ്, വെരി ഗുഡ് പ്രസന്റേഷൻ സന്ദീപ്.
സാറേ, താങ്ക് യു സോ മച്ച്. എന്റെ അടുത്ത ക്ലാസ്സിൽ ഞാൻ ഉറപ്പായിട്ടും ഞാൻ കണ്ടിന്യൂ ചെയ്യാം. ഐ വിൽ ബി ഗോയിങ് ത്രൂ ദ നേച്ചർ ഓഫ് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലോ.
താങ്ക് യു വെരി മച്ച് സന്ദീപ്.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, anyone? Any questions you want to ask?
Excellent.
With regard to the definition. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
And this video will be available in our LJRF learning platform.
Okay, sir. Any questions, anyone? നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എന്തെങ്കിലും സംശയം ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചോദിക്കാം. I think if there is no questions coming up, I think you have not understood what I have presented, unfortunately. That I have to assume. റോൺസിക്ക് മനസ്സിലായെന്ന് ഞാൻ അസ്യൂം ചെയ്യുന്നു, അഭിജിത്തിന് മനസ്സിലായെന്ന് ഞാൻ അസ്യൂം ചെയ്യുന്നു. ബാക്കിയുള്ളവർ
I think almost all students are learners.
Yes.
You please give time for learning.
Sure. Next class, even in the next class, you can
they will
you can
definitely
ask.
ask questions.
Sure,
I
sure,
think
sure.
Aisha is there, so Aisha will wind up the session.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep sir, for an enlightening and insightful session on the right way. And I am pretty sure that this will help a lot for our coming preparation. Thank you once again, sir. And dear participants, once again, I am saying that if anyone have any doubts or queries regarding the session, you can ask now. And dear other resource person or professors, if you have anything to add on to the topic, you can add now.
Okay, fine.
So now
Thank you,
we
everyone. Thanks so much.
okay, so now we can wind up our session. Friends, the next class will be at 6 p.m. today by Safi sir, Assistant Professor in Law in Government Law College, Trivandrum, regarding the area of Constitutional Law of India. And today he will be dealing the topic Preamble and Fundamental Rights. Read the Bare Act carefully. And the link will be available in the group. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for
Thank you.
your time. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.